Greetings, Disney adults, Disney fans of all ages. Welcome. Disney adult. Now, I've shouted out to Disney adults in every video I've done, but what is a Disney adult? Very simple definition. A Disney adult is someone who loves going to the Disney parks, or they love buying Disney merch, or they love watching Disney movies, even though they don't have a child of their own. It could describe a single person who just doesn't have kids yet, or a married couple also who don't have kids yet. Or it could describe an older couple or an older person whose kids are grown. Any of these would be considered Disney adults. Now, the term Disney adult is not always a good term. There are a number of people who use the word Disney adult in kind of a sarcastic or scoffing manner. They don't understand why a grown person would spend their hard-earned money on Disney stuff. Whereas a lot of Disney adults tend to own that. They wear that title with a certain degree of pride. They consider it a badge of honor to be called a Disney adult. And certainly there are a lot of Disney adults out there. I know the YouTube groups that we love to watch, most of them are Disney adults. I have friends and family on Facebook that we will talk about Disney. So here's the question. What would Walt think of Disney adults? What would Walt think of those friends and family members that I have on Facebook who would consider themselves Disney adults, who love to talk Disney with me? What would Walt think of all of these YouTube bloggers that we love to watch, of our friends at All Ears, or Rob at Ear Scouts, or Nate paging Mr. Morrow, or of Jackie at Super Enthused, or Matt and Alan over at, Molly and Alan over at Mammoth Club? What would Walt think of all of those people? All of those Disney adults? What would Walt think of me? What would Walt think of a grown man sitting in his office making videos about what he would think? A little bit of an existential crisis here. Just breathe. Breathe. I gotta go figure this one out. You stay there. I'll be right back. Go back in time.
Well, it came about when my daughters were very young, and Saturday was always Daddy's Day with the two daughters. So we'd start out and try to go someplace with, different things, and I take them to the merry-go-round, and I took them different places, and as I'd sit there while they rode the merry-go-round, did all these things, sit on a bench, eating peanuts, I felt that there should be something built, some kind of an amusement enterprise built where that the parents and the children could have fun together. So that's how Disneyland started. Well, it took many years. It was a period of maybe 15 years developing. I started with many ideas, threw them away, started all over again, and eventually it evolved into what you see today as Disneyland. But it all started from a daddy with two daughters wondering where he could take them, where he could have a little fun with them, too.
Sorry, you're back. Most Disney fans recognize that story. It is the story of where Walt got the inspiration for Disneyland. As he took his daughters to Griffith Park and they played while he just sat on a park bench. Walt's desire was for a place where adults and children could have fun together, and that was the beginnings of Disneyland. Walt, I believe, very much achieved his goal, and in a very, very big way. The 30s and 40s, we had a typical family arrangement. Father was working, bringing home the bacon, as they say. Mom usually was not working outside of the home. We have the classic mom is the homemaker taking care of the children. And then you kind of have the kids doing their own thing, going to school, playing, enjoying their lives. But over the 60s and into the 70s and all the way up to now, we sort of have a little bit of a paradigm shift. We see adults working in an effort to try to spend more time with their children and with their families. Now, I'm not going to try to say that Walt was solely responsible for this shift in thinking, but I do think that the opening of Disneyland had a lot to do with it. I think Disneyland and other parks like it were a contributing factor to this idea that parents and children can have fun together. Now, who were the benefactors of this shift in our thinking? Well, me for one. You see, back many years ago, and I don't want to tell you when, but my father and my mother took our family to Disney World for the first time. I was just 9 years old, and we went to Disney, and it was a wonderful, wonderful experience. In fact, the last night we were at Disney, as we were on the boat heading back to Fort Wilderness, I cried and cried and cried because I didn't want to leave. Now, those experiences led to one of my favorite memories growing up. And that was my sister and I always wanted to ride Mr. Toad's Wild Ride with my dad. See, we would get on the ride and my dad would let either me or my sister sit behind the steering wheel and we'd spin the steering wheel. Meanwhile, my father is sitting beside us, and the whole time, during the whole trip, he's like, "Watch out! You're getting ready to hit something! You're a terrible driver!" and all of this kind of stuff. My sister and I would laugh and laugh. We'd complete the ride, and we would insist we had to ride it again so that whoever didn't get to ride with Dad would get to ride with Dad. And it is a wonderful, wonderful memory I have of my father. I had a similar experience when I became a dad. My own son, Jacob, when he was around 9 or 10, we took him and he rode Splash Mountain for the first time. Now, his first trip to Disney when he was 4, and we would try to get him to ride Splash Mountain, but he was a little apprehensive. Well, finally, we were able to convince him. His cousins were with him. He said, "I'm going to go ahead and ride Splash Mountain." So as we approach the loading area, we naturally say, "Well, Jacob, who do you want to ride with you?" And he said, "Dad." So I got to ride beside my son on his first ever trip on Splash Mountain. And it was absolutely wonderful. So we're riding Splash Mountain. And of course, we're going through most of it, which is just a very slow boat ride. And he's loving it. He's having a great time. Every so often, we'd hit a little bit of a hill, and he would look at me and say, "Was that it?" I said, "No, son. I'll tell you when the big drop comes." Well, of course, when the big drop comes on Splash Mountain, you start your ascent up. The music gets darker. The ride scene gets a little darker. And we start our ascent up. Now, something you need to know about my son, when he gets nervous, he talks a lot. So we approached the scene, and I said, "Jacob, this is where it is." And he starts saying, "Okay, I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm not really. Because I know you and Mom have said that it's not bad. And I know, and I'm kind of excited about it too, but I am a little nervous. But I'm not too scared, but I am a little scared. This was all the way up. We get to the top. We make our descent. Of course, water, splash, screams, laughter. And then my son looks up at me, wipes the water from his face, and he says, "That was awesome!" And I'm so excited that I got to share that with him. So Disney definitely accomplished his goal. A place where adults and children could play together. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're saying, okay, the examples you just listed are adults with children. And you would be right. But I do want to take a moment to discuss something that I don't think Walt would have ever thought about. You see, Walt died in 1966, and Disneyland was only 11 years old at the time. So I want to discuss a little something that I am going to call the generational effect. And that is simply this. I took my first trip to Disney World when I was 9 years old. We loved it. And we would go back every year or two all through my growing up years, all through my middle school and high school years. In fact, my parents took me there for my senior graduation trip. And I loved it so much that I went back a couple of years later in college and said, I want to work there on the college program. Later on, of course, I met my wife and we got married, and she said I would like to go to Disney for our honeymoon. And I was able to take my wife and introduce her to Disney and all things Disney. Now, was I expected when I turned 18 to all of a sudden say, oh, I'm an adult now, so I'm not allowed to like Disney anymore? No, of course not. And I call that the generational effect. We have a lot of people now who can say, I have grown up with Disney. Disney's been a part of my life, literally all of my life. Many of the YouTubers that I've mentioned that we love to watch would say the same thing. Disney was a part of our lives growing up. And so it's a generational thing. As we continue and move through generation after generation, we introduce more and more people to Disney World. And indeed, my own son, he went to Disney for the first time when he was 4, but he has gone about every couple of years ever since. He is 24 now, but he is definitely a Disney adult. So, I don't think Walt would have a problem with Disney adults. In fact, one other story that I will share with you, I've read many times about how Walt, after Disneyland was open, he would have a rough week at work and he would retire, say on Friday evening, to his apartment above the firehouse at Disneyland. And he would spend a day in Disneyland as a guest, walking around just like you and me. Walt was the original Disney adult. And I want you to imagine something, if you would. Can you imagine going to Disneyland, waiting in line to ride the Jungle Cruise, getting on the boat and realizing that Walt Disney is on your boat riding with you? That just blows my mind. So no, I don't think Walt would have any issues with Disney adults. All of that said, a final cautionary tale, if you will. Disney adults, remember, and I think Walt would definitely agree with me here, Disney first and foremost is for the kids. Now, I'm grateful that I can go as a Disney adult and hang out and spend time in the parks as an adult. First and foremost, it is for the kids. And something to remember is the children, for the children, the magic is still very real. Now, as an adult, the magic is still very real to me, but it's a little different. Sometimes I know how the magic works, which actually doesn't dilute the magic at all. And at times, I'm able to help out a little bit with the magic, which is kind of special. But remember, it's about the kids first. A quick story. Several years ago, my wife and I were at Epcot, and there was a festival going on. I don't remember which one, but we wanted to try the ham and Swiss pretzel bread from the Germany festival booth. And so my wife had gone off to find a place for us to sit, and I was waiting in line. Well, if you've ever been to that Germany festival booth, right there beside it is a little area that they've reserved for a meet and greet for Snow White. And Snow White had come out for a meet and greet. And this, by the way, would have been the perfect day for a meet and greet because there were 2 people waiting to meet Snow White. One was a little girl, 9, 10 years old, I guess. She had on a princess dress. It wasn't a Snow White dress, but it was a princess dress nonetheless. Very excited to get to meet Snow White, an actual Disney princess. The other person in line was a woman, probably late 30s, early 40s, also waiting to meet Snow White. Well, the woman was first in line, so she went over and had her picture made with Snow White, talked with Snow White, talked with the cast member that was there with Snow White, talked to the PhotoPass photographer, had another picture made, had several more pictures made. Eventually, I kind of felt like she was making a Snow White portfolio. Asked more questions of the photographer and Snow White, and literally spent about 15 minutes monopolizing Snow White's time. All the while, our little 9 or 10-year-old princess is just standing there patiently, waiting for her chance to meet Snow White. Eventually, and I'm kind of watching this as I'm going through the line. It took about 15 minutes, like I said, for me to get through the line. I finally placed my order, found my wife, and we sat down. I like to think that eventually this woman said, okay, I'm going to leave now, and the little girl was able to meet Snow White. But it got me to thinking, Disney adults, remember, it's for the kids. I'm not necessarily saying that the woman should have let the girl go first. I'm a teacher. I'm also the children's choir director at our church, so I often have to work with children. And many is the time that I have to teach them how important it is to wait your turn, to be patient, to not try to break in front of other people. So there's certainly a lesson to be learned for that little girl, but at the same time, should the lesson have been learned from an adult? And I dare say I believe what I would have done had I been her is I would have looked at the little girl and I would have said, why don't you go first? Chances are that little girl was going to have her picture made, get an autograph, give Snow White a hug, be on her way. And then you could go in and do whatever you wanted to. Even if she didn't do that, this woman could have gone in, gotten her picture made, talked to Snow White a little bit, and then said, thank you for spending time with me. I think this little girl wants to meet you, and I think you ought to try to take some time to meet her. That would have been acceptable as well. But instead, the feeling I got was this little girl unfortunately was denied a chance to meet a princess because of a Disney adult who was monopolizing Snow White's time. This is an example of how not to be a Disney adult. This is a good example of why Disney adults are sometimes spoken of with scorn and derision. is because sometimes Disney adults do these sorts of things. So if you're watching and you're a Disney adult, please remember the children come first. Let the children enjoy the magic. So I feel better now, because I truly believe that Walt would be fine with Disney adults. Tell me what you think. Would you classify yourself as a Disney adult? Do me a favor. Give me a like, subscribe to my channel, and I would love it if you'd leave a comment. I hope you have a great Disney adult kind of day, and I look forward to seeing all of my Disney adult friends over at Disney World very soon. Thanks for watching.